Okay, for the next one, they tell us that we're between pi over 2 and pi. So if we're trying to figure out what quadrant that's in, that's going to be the second quadrant. Your pi over 2 would be this line right here, and this line is going to be your pi. So we know it's going to be drawn here in the second quadrant. So draw the triangle out. We bring it down to the closest x-axis. So right angle there. And then inside here, this is going to be our theta. So now the triangle is properly drawn. When we label this, you want to get 2 out of the 3 sides there, because that way you can use Pythagorean theorem to find the third side. In this case, I have cosecant equals 3, but I can always make it into a whole number by just putting it over 1. So now I actually have 2 sides that I can label on my triangle. So cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So it means hypotenuse over opposite. That's what cosecant is. So I'm going to label that hypotenuse, and then I have opposite down below there. So now I have both of the sides are labeled. Hypotenuse is supposed to be 3. That's here. Opposite, across from the theta. That's this one. That's going to be 1. So again, opposite of or across from the theta, that's how you know which side is opposite. That means that this last side is going to be our adjacent side. Now we're going to use Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And in this case, the 3, that's going to be over here. That's the longest side, so we've got to put that in for c. And then for the rest of it, we put a 1 in there for b, and now we'll solve for a. So a squared plus 1 is going to equal 9. Subtract the 1, we get a squared is equal to 8, and then square root both sides. Now if you have a square root like this, in this case that can be broken down more, you definitely want to go ahead and do that for this problem. So in this case, the square root of 8 it can be written as 4 times 2, so this can be rewritten as 2 square root of 2, and that's what I'll put down here. Now remember that when you do the square root of both sides, you technically get a plus or minus there when you do that. So we need to decide whether this is going to be a positive or a negative. Now in this case, because you're talking about the negative x-axis on this side, it's very important you remember to put a minus sign next to your answer there. If you don't put the minus sign, that means you're going to get these wrong, because these involve numbers off of this picture. So be really careful to make sure you have the correct signs on all your numbers when you have it labeled there. So going in this direction, that's negative x values, minus sign will go next to it. Now we have the triangle complete. We're ready to answer our other 5 trig values to get those. So cosine is going to be the adjacent over a hypotenuse. The adjacent is negative 2 radical 2. Here's your opposite. The opposite is 1. Hypotenuse is going to be 3. So if we use our definition, it's negative 2 radical 2 over 3. And then we're going to flip this, negative 3 over 2 radical 2. I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to rationalize it in a minute. But first I want to answer the rest of these, and I'll come back and I'll rationalize a little bit later. So if I do tangent, tangent is opposite over hypotenuse. So I get negative 1 over, opposite over adjacent. Opposite over adjacent is your tangent there. We just did that. 1 over negative 2 radical 2. Opposite over adjacent is this. Now if I take the reciprocal of that right away, then I get negative 2 radical 2. I wanted to actually do this part first before I rationalize these guys, because once it's in this form, it's easier just to go ahead and write the answer right away. That way you don't have to re-rationalize again. So that's why I wanted to show you this one right away by flipping it over. Now your sine is just going to be the reciprocal of cosecant, so that's going to be 1/3. Now we have 2 answers here that need some rationalizing, so I am going to go ahead and show that for you down here where there's some more space. So if I do negative 3 over 2 radical 2, when you rationalize this, you don't want to multiply by 2 radical 2. You don't have to do that. You're multiplying by an unnecessary extra 2. So instead, we're going to multiply top and bottom by just the radical part only. When you do that, you get negative 3 radical 2. In the bottom, we get 2, but then we have these 2 multiplied, and you're going to get another 2 out of that. And so that's going to give you negative 3 radical 2 over 4 is going to be your final answer. So this should be negative 3 radical 2 over 4. That's the correct way to rationalize. If we do the other one, if we do that, negative 1 over 2 radical 2, and again I'm going to multiply this by radical 2 over radical 2. And if we do that, we get negative radical 2. In the bottom, I have a 2 here, but again, I get an extra 2 in the bottom, so negative 2 radical 2 over 4. And that's going to be my answer for this. So I get negative radical 2 over 4 would be the correct rationalized answer. So again, every time you have a radical in the bottom, you always want to rationalize.